Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 97. I'm Igneous and today we're working on the back end of the Cetorhinus for a change. Kind of a nice change. The front is done-ish. It's up to the point where I feel like we can move on to another area and not have too many ideas nagging in the back of our mind about what's going on in the front end. Right now, I'm just filling in the floor so that I can get a very clear image of how much space that we have to work with, which is obviously a lot. It's a very large ship. I'm pretty sure it's larger in every way than the last capital vessel. Not necessarily by a huge amount, but definitely larger. One of the things that I wanted to do on the back end here to start was get the propulsion thrusters placed, because the structure that we build around those is something that other areas of the ship are going to have to tie into. So if we do that first, it might make things a little bit easier as we progress along the top and down the sides of the ship to close everything in. So that means we have to place generators like these. These are the tier 2 capital vessel generators. I've never seen them before. They're quite large. You can see my character is standing there on the floor, and then the generators beside him are absolutely massive. I also want to place the warp drive, because the warp drive is one of those things. The generators are large. They're not necessarily difficult to find a home for, but the warp drive itself, one of the things that I've learned from previous iterations on the whole capital vessel theme, is that I don't like having to go around it for any reason. I had one capital vessel where I had to go up and across a walkway and then down to get past the warp drive. I did not like that. So in this case, you can see we're putting in the columns, the cylindrical columns, and then a platform, and then the warp drive we can put on top of that. I love the look of the warp drive. It's just very detailed, intricate kind of model. And so one of the things that I've developed the habit of doing is we place this warp drive, and then because I can run under it, I wanted to place some glass so that if I wanted to, if I was really interested, I could look up and see what was going on with the warp drive above me. One of the things that I discovered, and this is actually a big tip for me anyway, some of you are already very familiar with this, is that you can change the polarity of glass with the multi-tool. I did not know that. So we've got a square piece of glass, and you can see as we place it, the polarity is working against us. It's very difficult to see through to the warp drive above, but if we use the multi-tool, change it to the change and rotate setting, and then left click on the glass, all of a sudden we can see through it so much easier because the polarity is reversed. Now the reason why I didn't know this is because the feature to do that used to be on the old change and rotate tool. There was a special tool that required its own special power packs and allowed you to rotate blocks in place after they had been placed. And one of the things it allowed you to do was change the polarity of glass once the glass had been placed. I was clearing out our old capital vessel, and I came across one of these old rotation tools that I no doubt got from Point of Interest, one of the loot crates, and noticed on the tooltip that it could change the polarity of glass. So I checked the multi-tool to see if that feature was carried over when they were merged, and it was. So the multi-tool can be used to change the polarity of glass. The reason why that's kind of a big deal for me is because everything that I've done with glass in the past is part of the challenge is getting all of the different pieces of glass to line up with their edges the way that they look nice and pretty and all that other stuff. And then you look at what you've just built and you realize that a third of the pieces you just placed, the polarity is wrong. It's different from the ones around it. So you either have to replace it with the same block shape that's got the reversed polarity version, or you have to remove it and flip it around and place it again. Either way, not ideal, not necessarily the easiest way to deal with that stuff. And because I had never used the rotational tool, I didn't know that there was an option to do that with the glass in place. So now I know. The other reason why I don't use a lot of glass is because it's pretty flimsy. And there's always that part of me that's a little bit concerned about reducing the resilience of a ship by using glass. There are going to be lots of places on a given ship where you can afford to reduce the armor value without necessarily sacrificing the resilience of the ship as a whole. So it gives us that option in the future that we can make things look a little bit more interesting through the use of glass, the thoughtful use of glass, and the whole process is much, much easier because we can change the polarity without having to go through such an ordeal. Kind of cool. The thrusters, as you can see, these are the same thrusters that we put in the lift arms that are reaching around the side of the hangar. They're the double XL capital vessel thrusters. These have gone through a number of revisions in terms of their appearance, and I quite like the way that they look. So in this case, when we're working on the design for the back of the ship, I don't really feel like it's necessary to put a whole lot of time and effort into this super detailed sort of thing when we've already got these thrusters doing the work for us. They already look interesting, and if we try and make the structure around them look interesting, it's almost as if we're competing, and you run the risk of losing the competition. So I'm absolutely fine with the idea of just keeping this very, very simple around the thrusters. And then, if we want to embellish it a little bit later on, it's not necessarily a difficult thing to do. But starting off simple, I think, is the way to go in a situation like this. We still have to put the lateral thrusters, the ones that help us to move side to side, the descent thrusters, and the reverse thrusters, the ones that will allow us, if we're moving forward, to slow down and stop, and also to obviously move in the reverse direction. In total, I've done the math. We've got 4 propulsion thrusters, and we've got the 4 lift thrusters. If we take 2 on each side for the lateral thrusters, that brings us to a total of 12. Then we have 2 thrusters for descent, which should be plenty in most cases, and 3 thrusters for reverse and slowing down and all that other stuff. Brings us to a total of 17, which happens to be the specific number that I have on hand, most of which came from our previous capital vessel, but I think I had 1 or 2 also in storage from points of interest that kind of got included in the mix. So that brings us to the primary concern on my mind right now, and I don't know why, of all the things that I could be concerned about, is fuel. The last capital vessel was really, really hard on fuel, especially in atmosphere, and it was one of those situations where you had to produce so many Promethium fuel packs to keep the thing full that if you ran the thing empty, it was not a small thing to refill them all again. So if you're getting around in a planet and the gravity is pulling you down and you're going through fuel faster than you would in space and you're trying to figure out where you want to land, you don't necessarily feel like you have the option to choose the best landing spot. You choose the nearest flat space and set down so that you don't burn all your fuel. Now we have the hydrogen packs, the largest fuel cells in the game currently. If you combine Promethium pellets with hydrogen tanks, that's what you get. I've got 5 hydrogen generators, and I'm just today made the decision that it's not nearly enough, so we're going to have to place some more. I've got Promethium all day, every day, Promethium. Everywhere I look, I've got Promethium. But it's the hydrogen that we're going to need in order to keep this thing aloft, and hoping that between 20 fuel tanks and filled with the larger fuel cells, the ship will last longer so that it's a little bit less stressful going around. You can land where you feel is the best place to land without having to worry about whether or not you've got the fuel to get you there. The other consideration that I have right now is combat steel blocks, because I'm pulling iron out of Oskatune as fast as the game will allow me to, and it's not coming out fast enough for us to stay on top of the number of blocks that we're using for this build. What we may end up doing is building what we can with what we have access to, and when the combat steel dries up, weaponizing this guy and then just taking it for a quick rip to another planet and setting up there where we can get the iron that we need to finish the ship properly. So the one thing that I don't want to do and won't do is sacrifice the build and say, well, I was going to do all these other things, but we ran out of combat steel, so this is what you get. But we are going to have to be a little bit creative in how we come up with the materials that we'll need in order to finish the ship the way that I want to finish it. It's all about the problem solving. And I think for me, that's part of the interest in these kinds of scenarios, playing in survival. I know people are all, anytime I start talking about resources and what it takes to build a ship, people are always like, why don't you just build it in creative? And that kind of defeats the purpose, because this is the challenge of building in survival, is that you don't have always all of the resources that you need in order to build the ship the way you want to, and you have to make that decision. Do we go and get the resources, or do we sacrifice the utility of the ship? In our case, we're going to go get the resources, and not sacrificing the utility of the ship is what provides that compelling aspect of the game that gets us out into other places in the universe and facing the different challenges and things that might be there. So in the next episode, we're going to continue on. We're going to continue building around the thrusters. When we get to areas where we need to place the other thrusters, that's exactly what we'll do. And we'll just kind of be a little bit cautious about what we're building and what it's going to take to finish those specific areas, so that if we do have to kind of button things up temporarily and head off to new planets, the ship isn't lopsided and bizarre looking. At least it'll be kind of uniform, and the guns might be in weird places, but at least it'll be set up to get us where we need to go. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.